and welcome to episode 4 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam Kane of Danger Moose.
I'm Sahil Shah of the Big League Yellow Champs.
And we got an exciting show for you today. We got long interviews with both Zane Harding and Erik McKeen. Zane will be talking about the big moves and big strategy shifts his team has made. And Erik will be helping us talk about and reveal the award winners. You all voted last week for the fantasy awards, and we've got your winners for you in several different categories, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, very excited to hear what the awards are. But before we do that, why don't we discuss some of the general league news that has occurred over the past couple days. I know we had another set of meetings last night, and a few trades came out of it. Obviously, the big one was the 16-player deal. There's a lot of moving pieces here. I believe the 16 players / picks in the deal is the most players and picks involved in a single two-team trade in league history. And it ties the only 3-team deal made in league history between me, Cam, and Connor during the very first season of the league. So Cam and I aren't going to go really in depth on that here. We're going to have Connor and Andrew on next week to discuss their thoughts on the deal, but we wanted to discuss some of the other deals that have gone down over the past couple days. And the one I wanted to start with, Cam, was the one between Erik and Clayton and Jake. Clayton and Jake traded Zach Plesac, their 2021 and 2022 seconds, and Andrew's 2022 second to Erik for Lance Lynn, Dylan Bundy, and Eliezer Hernandez. What are your thoughts on that deal?
I like that trade a lot. 3 great starting pitchers going. I think Zach Plesac is the best pitcher in that deal, and he's got the highest ceiling. So it makes sense that he's going on his own in the other direction with the 2 guys coming back. Lance Lynn, I don't want to spoil anything, but I later in the episode talk about how much I like him and how great of a season he had. And Dylan Bundy, I'm not super buying it, but the peripherals look really phenomenal for him this year, and it's possible that Bo the Flow could be getting 2 aces back just for one. The 2 second rounders are not 3 second rounders actually going to Erik are nice. I haven't looked too much into Eliezer Hernandez, but he seems kind of like a throw-in to me. Overall, it's just a lot of moving starting pitchers, and I think it's hard to pick a clear winner.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that, really this comes down to, is Dylan Bundy's breakout this year legitimate? As an Orioles fan, I know just how things go and starting pitchers leave our teams. They end up doing much better elsewhere. Looking at Kevin Gausman and Jake Arrieta in recent years. So I buy, just kind of looking at Dylan Bundy this year, that he's made some changes to his game to improve. But that being said, it was only an 11-start sample size. He wasn't as good the second half of the season as he was the first half of the season. And I'd be interested to see what he does over the course of a full season. But I would agree with you, Cam, that Zach Plesac is probably the best pitcher in the deal. I buy Cleveland's kind of pitching development, and Plesac is a couple years younger than Bundy. So I think Erik got the best pitcher. I think you're right. Lance Lynn had a very solid season. I think he can keep it up for a couple years. I think he is a little bit on the older side. He'll turn 34 during the season next year. But, I mean, the numbers have been great over the course of his career, and there's no reason to me that he can't, keep this up and be a solid starter for Bo the Flow. I think Eliezer Hernandez is kind of a throw-in, but I think that there's some decent upside there. So ultimately, I mean, I'm usually on the side of the team who gets the best player. So I think I'd slightly lean towards Erik here. But again, it's hard to tell without knowing what Erik's going to do exactly with those second round picks. and hard to tell without knowing how Dylan Bundy is going to do moving forward. So good deal for both sides, though.
Yeah, I agree. Zane and Max made a couple trades as well, but we'll talk in detail with Zane about those, including one that he will be announcing live on air during that next segment we have. Something to look forward to. But the next decently sized deal that we wanted to talk briefly on was one I made, in which I acquired Jock Peterson from Bo with the Flow. Do you have any, before I break it down, what were your initial reactions, Sahil, when I made that move?
Yeah, I think that there's a little bit of a risk here because my guess is that Connor's second round pick will be a lottery pick. But there's no guarantee that, it's going to be the top pick in the round or the second pick in the round. And on the flip side, there's no guarantee I win the championship next year. I could easily lose in the semis or you or Ruthvik or Zane and Max or Erik could, finish as a higher seed potentially. So there could be a bigger gap in those picks than we think. If it ends up being like a 2-pick gap, I think that's fine. But, if this is more like 5 or 6, pick like a gaps 5 to 6 kind of picks in between, then I'm not so sure. I mean, Jock Peterson's like a solid bat. I mean, he hits for home runs. He has a decent, OBP, but I think he mostly hits well against righties. And I know he's going to be a free agent. So I'd be curious to see how he does on a team that isn't the Dodgers. So, I mean, I don't think that this trade ultimately has a huge effect one way or another, but I'm a little concerned just with what the drop off in the picks might be.
So I'll break down my thinking on it real quick. When I found out that we were adding an extra utility spot, Jock Peterson was the guy who kind of came to mind just because I've always been a little higher on him than others, and I knew I could use him in that spot, and I knew he'd probably be pretty cheap. And especially with him being a free agent this coming year, he'll have a lot more playing time with whichever team he joins. And I was figuring, first of all, I was unaware that the lottery order continued in the second round just because, that's not how the NBA does it. And I figured that we'd follow the only real life lottery example. But anyway, I still think it'll most likely be a 3 to 4 pick difference. And Jock Peterson is someone I think is worth that risk.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a good point about the NBA lottery. I wonder if that's a potential rule change that will make next year. That's actually what I thought at first, how the lottery order would be applied, but evidently that's not the way that we're doing it. Definitely something to maybe keep an eye out for in future years. But the next trade that I wanted to talk about here was the first trade Ruthvik has made this offseason. So now every team has made a trade. Ruthvik sent Austin Nola and Daniel and Alex's 2022 second-round pick to Yuki for Anthony Santander and Kyle Muller. Do you want to start off with your thoughts?
Yeah, so first of all, Austin Nola, I would have thought would sell for a lot more than that just because, he sold for a lot in real life. But I'm not super high on Anthony Santander. He was just been sitting on free agency for a while. I believe I had him in the 2019 season for a couple weeks. And then Kyle Muller is just one of a dozen Braves pitching prospects who didn't really turn into anything. And it's not like he's a bust yet. He could still get to the majors and do something good, but I'm not the most confident in his abilities, especially with all the young pitchers who are ahead of him and with that 5.48 walk rate in 2019. Not something that gives me a lot of confidence. So overall, I think if Austin Nola can keep up his pace from this year, San Diego Padres certainly believe he can, then I think this could be a very good deal for Yuki.
Yeah, I'm a little torn here because I think, Austin Nola has showed quite a bit in his 2 years in the major leagues so far. He only played 79 games in 2019 and 48 games this year, and I'd be curious to see how he holds up over the course of a full season. So I think that there's a little bit of risk there. I think Santander, I like the power numbers, but and I know a lot of Orioles fans are high on him, but the one thing that really gets me is that he just doesn't have a high OBP. I mean, his OBPs are 300 or under, and I think that that's a real detriment in a league where OBP is one of the offensive categories. Now, if he could get his OBP up even like 20 points, I think he could be an Eddie Rosario type player, and if he can continue this run production, I think that he could be a valuable fantasy asset. But I'm not sure if the ceiling is all that high. One more thing I'll add is that I'm a little confused by the positional fit for Yuki. He already had JT Realmuto, who's the best catcher in baseball right now. He has now Nola in the majors as well. He has Dalton Varsho, who's going to lose his prospect eligibility next year. And I get it, like Varsho is also outfield eligible, but I don't think the bat is going to play as a fantasy outfielder. I think as a fantasy catcher he could, but not an outfielder. And Sam Huff, William Contreras, and Miguel Amaya are also solid catcher prospects in his organization. So he now has 6 catchers on his team as a whole. I don't think anybody else between their major league and their minor league team is more than like 4 at the most. So a little interesting to see what he's doing there, and losing some outfield depth, which is a position he needs some more depth at for another catcher, is not really a move that I totally get. I think if he wanted to sell Santander, maybe there was a better trade to make there.
Yeah, I agree. And he had said a couple days ago that he was close to acquiring Gary Sanchez, and that deal never came through. So maybe he's been considering trading Realmuto the entire time. And just since he's kind of been interested in acquiring a catcher, maybe with the idea of moving another catcher. So far that hasn't happened, but it's only been a day. We'll see what he does with that catcher spot, because I believe he likes Dalton Varsho very much as well.
He does. He definitely does. We want to move on to the last big trade that we wanted to discuss. Right before the big 16-team trade or 16-player trade yesterday, Erik traded Gio Urshela and Connor's 2021 third-round pick to Connor for Hunter Green. Personally, I thought that Connor got the best out of this deal. Urshela had another very solid season, and I know Hunter Green's lost a good chunk of the past 2 years with injuries. And I don't know if he's ever going to quite reach his potential in the major leagues, but I know you're the Reds fan, Cam, so maybe you have a bit better of an idea of how Hunter Green's going to do. So curious to hear your thoughts.
First of all, a little confused as to why Connor's making this trade. Gio Urshela, I believe he's had him in the past, maybe even on more than one occasion. But the fact that Connor, of all people, is trading a pitching prospect with a very high ceiling for a steady third baseman is a little surprising to me. As for Hunter Green in particular, I'm very torn. He's just so flashy, and like I said, the ceiling is just so high, but I'm very worried about his ability to stay healthy. So, God, I don't know what I think about him. I like him as a person, and I hope he does well, and I think when he's healthy, he'll be good. There's just no guarantee he can even stay healthy long enough to reach the majors.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. One thing I'll add is I think Connor very much likes Gio Urshela, so I think this is just one of those moves where there's a player he's really targeting and he really wanted to get. I know, like you said, he's had Gio Urshela in the past. And interestingly enough, we were kind of tracing the trade tree for Urshela yesterday. I picked him up last offseason, almost immediately traded him to Connor, who traded him back to me. I traded him to Erik. Erik almost traded him back to me. Actually, we were in discussions for an Urshela Castellanos deal, but instead he traded him back to Connor. So seems like he's just destined to bounce back and forth between our three teams. And one last thing I'll say is that I know Connor mentioned that he was shopping Hunter Green quite a bit and wasn't really getting any takers. So I wonder if maybe the market just wasn't quite there for Hunter Green, even though he is kind of a higher upside arm, and he does have kind of a relatively big name as a prospect.
Yeah. So the one other big change in the league that happened this week was the official ruling by Erik that after the draft, we would have 2 or 3 days to get our rosters down from whatever the number is after the draft, 250. And that's something that's never really come up before, just because each of the past couple years at the draft, we have added prospect slots. But this year we will not be. So I think that's probably a decision that was obvious, but I believe it's worth talking about, and I think we made the right call there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that it's going to have some interesting effects on the strategy in the league. I think that people are going to be looking to get excess value for some of their bottom prospects. And I think some of the teams with fewer picks or with weaker farm systems can benefit from that, because there's either going to be prospects available at a discount or prospects that are just getting caught right after the draft. And I can see there being a mad dash. I think this slightly increases the value of third-round picks, which is actually why I've been trying to acquire and hold on to a couple, because I anticipate there being maybe a decent prospect or two kind of available there closer to cut down day. And generally, I wonder what this is going to mean for some of the teams right now who are just absolutely loaded with picks this year. I'm thinking teams like Erik and EBO, where I feel like they have a general plan for what they want to do in the draft. I feel like that more applies to some of these top guys. It doesn't necessarily apply to some of the guys at the bottom of their farm. Maybe they're just willing to cut them and accept that, like, they're probably not going to get value for them. But, it's going to be interesting to see how they choose to manage that. I'm also very glad we're not adding any more prospect spots. I think 20 is a very good number. It allows us to, find the occasional gem here and there, but it doesn't make it as easy just to find like a great prospect like maybe it was the first year when we only had 12 prospect spots. So overall, I think this is a good move for the league. I like this 30-20 split that we have right now. And I think that there's going to be some interesting kind of strategy moves that play out here.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely maybe been behind the surge of draft pick trades over the past couple days. And I like that. And I'm curious to see if we ever do end up adding prospect spots, if that would change. But I'm, again, very happy with the 20. All right. Well, it looked for a second like I would have been able to pull a Zane and have a trade to announce right here live, but that doesn't seem like it's going to happen now. So let's move on. We'll be right back with an interview with Zane Harding.
Won't decide, but he won't debate. Said thanks, my friend. Thought it was too late. Oh why, I don't know. So you think things move.
All right, we'd like to welcome back to the show co-owner of the Executive Batting Order, Zane Harding. How are you doing, Zane?
Not too bad. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing pretty well.
Pretty good.
Awesome. So yeah, we've got a lot to talk to you about this week. First of all, you've basically traded away every single one of your starting pitchers in exchange for a lot of bats and a lot of first round draft picks.
Yeah, and actually, as a fun thing, I would like to announce a trade right here on the podcast, and it will go into the chat right afterwards.
Oh.
The Executive Batting Order has agreed to send first baseman Luke Voigt to the Stratton Stranglers in exchange for outfielder Mike Yastrzemski, Cam's 2022 first-round pick, Connor's 2021 second-round pick, and the EBO's 2021 second-round pick.
Wow.
Ooh.
Now, I will just analyze it right off the bat, where I'm coming from with this. This is probably the most time I've spent actually comparing stats between two players before making a deal. This really makes first base complicated for us. But the fact that DJ LeMahieu has first base eligibility means that we can kind of shift around things any given day. Mike Yastrzemski and Luke Voigt, neither guy has played more than 110 to 120 games in a major league season to date. And they're both separated by 3 to 4 months of age. Luke Voigt obviously has better power. But in 2020, Mike Yastrzemski had 14 doubles and 10 home runs. Luke Voigt had 5 doubles and 22 home runs, and Yastrzemski had around a 400 on base percentage, and Luke Voigt was more in the 330 to 340 range. So when Max and I were discussing it, we both really like Yaz. There's a little worry on our end that both guys might have a slight regression going forward, but Yaz in his he's now had 161 career games, is somewhere between 4 and 5 WAR, and Voigt averages a little less. So I just think he's a very well-rounded hidden gem kind of player that the Giants uncovered. He was huge for us the moment we got him. And the fact that we were able to reacquire him and get a first next year, it's going to be a late first. It's your first rounder, Cam. But we also got an early second rounder in this draft and a late one. So now we have a little bit more flexibility for this year's draft if we want to trade a first rounder. But at the same time, I think there are 8 or 9 prospects in our farm that I want to replace with guys in this draft that I think I'll be able to get. So all in all, it felt like a win-win. I think Voigt's going to be a great power source for Erik, especially after he lost Marcell Ozuna in our previous deal, who was a huge, huge source of power for him this year. And I think Yastrzemski will be an awfully useful outfielder, util, on base kind of focus guy. If we're looking to get doubles in a matchup a bit more than home runs, but even then he had 10 home runs in under 60 games. So I like what I saw from that too.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never been the highest on Yastrzemski, but wow. Wow.
Well, knowing you all, you've made 12 of the 26 trades now that have occurred in the league as of this recording. I'm sure that you're going to make another move to bolster first base. I think that, just to talk a little bit about the trade, in my opinion, I think that Voigt is a solid player, but I think that he is a replaceable asset for you all. I mean, I think he could be a top 10 first baseman, but I don't think he is, I don't think you're losing out on a Freddie Freeman, for example. And I think that Yastrzemski, he's someone who's a bit complicated to me, but I feel like I've read a lot about him and have kind of buy that he's made some changes to improve his game. Now, I don't think the ceiling is particularly high. I don't think he hits as well as he did this year over the course of a full season, but I think, getting the picks is a very solid return for y'all and seems to really go with your strategy. So I would say a nice trade. I think I see why both sides wanted to make the deal, and I think it works out. So I'm glad we get to have a trade announced on the podcast. That's league history here. Definitely going to be in the next defining moments broadcast.
Yeah, I'm excited for that, and I think this would be a good way to transition to talking about your draft picks. You acquired 2 more picks, both kind of most likely in the 10 to 15 range, and you had said you're really looking to kind of revamp your team through the draft. You just acquired 2 more picks. Are you thinking maybe you want to hold on to all of your huge stockpile in the first round this coming draft?
Well, I think the situation is a little fluid right now. Looking at my prospect big board for this upcoming draft, I believe there are around a dozen guys that I'm very interested in. And there's another, I'd say 5 to 8 guys that I like. And just chatting around the league with there's not many of us that have picks. I know that Erik and I have similar boards, so we're going to be essentially taking guys that each of us both like. I think Yuki might take some wildcard picks out of here, so that might make things a little interesting. There are a couple picks that I feel are going to go a certain way, like Andrew taking Torkelson early, and one of Connor or Daniel and Alex taking Garrett Crochet. But we'll see about that. I actually have a bit less interest on Crochet than a lot of the White Sox fans and even the other AL Central fans in our league do, which is ironic because he looks like he's either going to be a really, really good reliever or he's going to be like take the Chris Sale path and start as a reliever right when he comes out of the draft and build up into like a formidable rotation piece. But there are other guys that I'm looking at in this draft that I'm very interested in. And at this point, we have, I believe, 8 picks. That's a lot. We might get rid of 1 or 2, but I will say, I think there are only maybe 8 prospects in our farm right now that I am a major fan of, maybe even 7. There might be only 7 prospects that I like a lot, but there are 3 or 4 other guys that I think have value, but I'm just not huge on. Maybe 3 to 5, I'd say. And then there's another like almost half of our farm that I can justify having them on my farm, and it's not like a waste of a roster spot, but I'm just not like freaking out about any of them, you know? So this has been a pretty furious mission to fix the farm and restore value there, just because we have a pretty tight major league roster right now. So instead of cutting guys or there's only so much room to consolidate value. And if I cut guys, I'm just losing out on value right there. And that's just going directly to another team. So if we can put that value into the farm, as we know, I don't think I've let any prospect actually graduate to the majors for the most part, except I used Scooble a couple times before I dealt him. And I will let Matt Manning go for us. I think he's actually probably the one prospect that's totally untouchable in our farm. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'll throw a couple numbers out here. Erik and EBO now combined to have 17 of the 36 picks in this draft, and EBO has 17 draft picks over the next 3 years, and EBO and Erik combined to own 7 of the 12 first-round picks this year. So it really seems like the draft for now is going to be dominated by those 2 teams, but as we've mentioned, anything can change. There's still a lot of time before the draft. One thing I wanted to ask you, though, Zane, was the decision to trade Tariq Skubal. I think we were all surprised when you traded Casey Mize and Riley Green. It seemed like, at least to me, throughout the season and the last offseason, that those Tigers prospects were untouchable, and those were the guys who were going to kind of be part of that next rotation and replace some of your older guys like the Verlanders, the Scherzers at the time before you traded him away. So I'm just kind of curious, to hear your – I know you think Matt Manning is the best of those Tigers prospects, but I just kind of want to hear the thought process behind your willingness to trade Skubal, Mize, and Riley Green, and maybe any other Tigers prospect if I'm missing them, because you've made so many trades at this point.
Yeah, so obviously we have shifted away from the starting rotation heavy strategy, and we've gone for a more bare bones one that essentially allows us to hit our innings limit without freaking out over whether our relievers are going to hit the innings limit themselves. So it's kind of like a similar setup to what Brian Kenny suggested for real baseball in Ahead of the Curve, where he said, oh, you have 1 or 2 aces really giving you like their full innings, and then it's kind of bullpen from the way out, and you have a large group of like guys like that. It might even be interesting for us to like acquire one of the like kind of long relief guys in the league at some point. Everybody's going to think of like the Rays pitchers, but even a guy like Daniel Norris sitting out there in free agency was very reliable for lowering ERA, and he's not a holds or saves guy, but he pitches like a few innings every game. So Tariq Skubal, I think he's going to be a solid pitcher for Detroit. I don't think we will see anything like that 48.2% strikeout rate that he had at Double-A Erie in 9 starts again. I think that it's a very encouraging sign that he, in his 7 games this year that he started, he lowered his walk rate from 10.6% to 8.2%. But at the same time, the reason he was able to dominate so hard at AA was, I mean, he had a 2.13 ERA, 126 FIP, 127 xFIP in those 42 innings at AA. He jumped straight to the majors, and let's be clear, he probably, like most prospects, would get more time in the minors. But he jumps to the majors. He still has a very respectable, like he struck out 27.6% of batters, which is more than 10 per 9 in his 7 starts this year. And he walked under 10%. He walked 8.2%. That's a 2.4% drop from his time in AA. But the fact that his strikeout rate was so absurd at AA, his strikeout minus walk percentage went from 37.6% to 19.4%. That's almost half of what it was at AA. And that's what kept him really at like supernova type prospect, kind of like scouting the stat sheet kind of prospect kind of guy. And in Detroit, he really struggled with the long ball, and his repertoire is very, very fastball heavy. He doesn't really go to his secondary pitches very much. He did use a little bit more of them once he came up, because you have to in the major leagues unless you're Lance Lynn. And he might even be Lance Lynn too, the sequel. But I felt that if we were going to choose between Tarek Skubal as our rotation ace for next year or Steven Strasburg, if we're only going to roster one, I thought Skubal was going to be the best balance of trading away and getting solid major league production next year and getting a solid return in a trade. Admittedly, when you look at that trade, we traded Kyle Seager with him for our first rounder this year, Andrew's second rounder this year, Alex and Daniel's third this year, and Ruthvik and Nick's third this year. And that's not the best haul we could have gotten for Skubal, for sure. Admittedly, the interest in this league on Kyle Seager was lower than you'd expect, seeing his numbers, and I think it's fair considering his age. But the biggest reason I was able to pull the trigger on that deal was that I'd already agreed in principle with Yuki that I could trade Andrew's second up 4 picks to a first round pick if I packaged one of my prospects with him, or with that draft selection. So those deals kind of work as a tandem, and I will miss Skubal. I actually, if I had to rank who would I want on my roster right now from the big 3 Tigers pitching prospects, I would probably actually put Mize in last after seeing his splitter completely go away when he got to the majors. Just because if that happens again, he is not a major league starting pitcher. Skubal, I saw really good signs. I think he lowers the home run rates. I think once he gets a little more experience underneath his belt, he is a high strikeout guy. He is not walking a ton of guys. So my Robbie Ray comparison was probably misguided. I think I put that in the chat at some point, because Robbie Ray just can't control his pitches. He could for a little bit there, and that's when he was a very viable fantasy starter. And Matt Manning, I just think, has the most balanced repertoire. He has the best mechanics and like most durable build of any of the 3. And I think he has the best stuff if it's unlocked. That's a big if. He is in the Tigers development system, but admittedly, they have done pretty well with Riley Green to this point. He has raised his stock. Skubal's stock rose heavily in our system. Manning has risen his too. I think there's reason to believe that he could be a fantasy ace. That's why I've chosen him of the 3.
Awesome. Yeah. And you had said you're doing the Brian Kenny thing and just kind of sticking with 1 or 2 starting pitchers. I've noticed the only healthy starting pitcher on your roster is Michael Pineda. Do you think he's a guy that you want to hold on to, or is he just kind of there?
Michael Pineda's in our lineup right now because he finished this past season with a 3.38 ERA, a 120 whip, which I find is respectable enough. And I know he only made a few starts there, but in his 5 starts this season, he was able to put together a 2.22 FIP at a 1.1 WAR. He did not allow a single home run in those 5 starts. He kept his walk rate really low, and his strikeout numbers were about in line with what he's had in his career. He actually had a little bit of trouble stranding base runners, and obviously that's where the runs were scored. But I like what I saw from him this year. He was good for 146 innings the year before, 4.01 ERA. That was probably like his best season since he was with the Yankees. Well, obviously he went from the Yankees to the Twins. He missed 2018, but like in his prime with the Yankees, I think we saw for the most part that come back in 19, and we saw an even better performance in 20. Will he be on our roster opening day? I think there's a 5% chance. I feel like at some point somebody's going to want to add a decent starting pitcher, and we are the easiest team to convince to trade a starting pitcher. So I know he's been dropped a couple times because you guys haven't been able to find a deal, but we're able to hold him on the roster for longer. So we'll see. And if he's on the roster opening day, I am totally welcome for him to give him an audition to be like a full-time pitcher on our team. And if not, maybe flip him for a third or even give him the drop if we have to.
So Cam and I, obviously, on the last podcast, went through and did all 20 trades that had been made up until that point and discussed them. Took us over an hour. So we don't want to kind of relaunch a giant discussion of each of those trades, but we want to kind of briefly get your thoughts on all of the trades that you made. So I'm thinking here just a couple sentences or less. Let's start with the first trade you made. Kenta Maeda and David Fletcher to Yuki for Starling Marte and DJ LeMahieu.
Okay. David Fletcher was first percentile in hard hit, like in like barrel rate on StatCast this year. So I wanted to flip him the moment I heard that stat. Ironically, Yuki told me that stat, and he was the one that I was negotiating with. Yuki likes him as like an old-fashioned kind of like fast, extra base hits kind of hitter, and I think he can serve that purpose. But I don't see much value in him. DJ LeMahieu,
the rich man's Joey Wensleydale.
Yeah. The rich man's Joey Wensleydale, and now we have Joey Wensleydale, which is funny enough. But DJ LeMahieu, 423 on base percentage, double-digit doubles and homers in a shortened season, scored a bunch of runs. Can't go wrong there. And we got Marte in that deal too. And Marte, the speed's going to go away at some point, but I still think he's a really strong player. So just felt like a win to us. Kenta Maeda, we sold at his highest value.
I agree. Next deal, Scherzer, Mize, Riley Green, Julio Urias, and prospect Heriberto Hernandez to Alex Fisher for Max Fried, Sixto Sanchez, Luke Voigt, who you just traded away, Monte Harrison, and Jarren Duran. Your brief thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I've dealt away 3 of the 5 pieces here. The only piece I think I really want to keep long-term is actually Jarren Duran. That might be a surprise to everybody, but his steal numbers are just gaudy at the lower levels. Max Scherzer, old. Casey Mize, I'm worried about. Riley Green, I think, is the best piece that we dealt in this deal. Julio Urias just doesn't get quality starts in fantasy baseball or in like our league, which is huge. Heriberto Hernandez, I know he's torn up the minors, but I think he's a little bit of a scout the stat sheet kind of guy. And then we were able to turn Max Fried, Sixto Sanchez, and Luke Voigt into like half of our offense now. So I really, really liked that one.
Let's talk about the next deal that you made. This one actually involving me. I traded you Greinke, Eddie Rosario, Michael Brantley, and Nelson Cruz for the aforementioned Max Fried, JD Martinez, Corbin Martin, Luis Matos, Andrew's 2022 second-round pick, and your 2023 second-round pick.
Yeah, so Zach Greinke actually ended up turning into 3 of the bullpen pieces I'm most excited for in our bullpenning strategy. I really wanted my hands on Kirby Yates, and I think Trevor Rosenthal's numbers were just so ridiculous, his strikeout numbers specifically, that I think he's back. And Gallegos is just a fun name to toss around. And he, when healthy, has been looking good so far. If we're looking at that as 3 relievers, 4 second-round picks, and Joey Wensleydale for Rosario, and then 2 huge pieces for our offense next year, even if they're more win now kind of guys in Brantley and Nelson Cruz. I felt that was worth it, and the best offer I received for Max Fried. JD Martinez, I wanted him off my roster. I don't think he's bouncing back. I think that the deal that you made with Jake and Clayton was incredible for you, and if it had happened in its original form, it would have been the biggest ripoff since, God, I don't know what. And I'm glad that they at least hunkered down and negotiated a little more. Corbin Martin was going to get cut at some point. I just don't see him being used. But he is a starting pitcher that's ready, major league ready, so I wanted to get value for him. Luis Matos was probably in our top 10 prospects, but I'm not crazy about him. And the picks I gave up, I've replaced them.
Not only have you replaced them, I traded both of those picks back to you.
Yeah, that's true. I wasn't sure if I have required so many picks that I wasn't sure if I had these ones back. But you're right. I have reacquired both of these selections. So
I will say one fun fact before we move on. Had we not done instead of trading Greinke and Rosario, I gave you the pieces that I gave you to get both of them back in the first place. This would have been a 21 player / pick deal. So
absolutely insane. I think this is probably the clearest win-win deal in the league so far this offseason. I think we both accomplished what we wanted to do very well.
Yeah.
And I think we have really unlocked our ability to trade with each other now that I have shifted to a completely polar opposite strategy from you, because it just means that we can both mutually benefit each other by me sending you, I've sent you pitchers and you have sent me bats and picks. And I've sent you bats too.
It is amazing. Let's go on to the next deal here. This is one of the few trades that I feel like Cam and I disagreed on a little bit. Erik traded Marcell Ozuna, Kyle Seager, Drew Pomerantz, and Keegan Aiken to you for Sixto Sanchez, Whit Merrifield, Mike Yastrzemski, and Frankie Montas. Your thoughts on that?
Before I made this trade with Erik just now, I thought it was the worst trade I've made to date. I really am really happy to have Marcell Ozuna and Drew Pomerantz, but I felt that I did overpay. And I was very excited to take it in the moment. And to my credit, I don't think Sixto Sanchez has the strikeout numbers to be an ace right now. And I think I sold him at a very good time because his value, I think, is going to, if it goes back up again, I think it's going to decrease a little bit before it goes up again. We don't have time to mess around with that. Whit Merrifield is getting older, and I missed that second base eligibility, especially now that I want to shift LeMahieu over into first base at some points. But at the same time, I think he had a 732 OPS this past season. So he brought steals, but we have steals. Mike Yastrzemski is back with the squad, so you might as well look at that as us sending Luke Voit, but we also got 3 more picks out of this deal. And I feel okay with that. I think Luke Voit we bought at his highest value, and we are selling him at his highest value because it hasn't changed. Frankie Montas, I'm just going to say, oops. Trade that the one time I think Alex has gotten me hard was getting Dominic Smith from us for Montas, because it was right before Montas had a horrible end to the season. I was like, I think he's actually going to bounce back to that old form, and he did the last start of the season, struck out 13 guys, but I'm just not big on him, and he's not getting starts with us under this current strategy. He's just too prone to a blow up. So yeah, I think it's looking very win-win now. When it first happened, I was a little more worried about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good analysis of that deal. And yeah, I think the fact that Cam and I were kind of a little bit split on that just shows, how close it was. But I do agree that you did do a good job in getting, Mike Yastrzemski.
And picks.
Yeah, getting all those picks. But talk about this next trade that you made. Chris Sale, Jesus Luzardo, Ronnie Mauricio, and Anthony's 2021 second-round pick to Andrew for Jordan Alvarez, Sean Murphy, Cam's 2021 first-round pick, and Erik's 2021 second-round pick.
This was the biggest gamble we have taken. Now, Chris Sale, I honestly kind of feel like he's going to bounce back. I mean, Verlander was when those two were dealing really well for Detroit and the White Sox. I thought they were the two best pitchers in the American League. Verlander had his period where he looked like, oh my God, he's having so many injury problems. I think his career is probably never going to be the same. I think Chris Sale might be set up to have that kind of renaissance. I think this deal can turn out very, very well for Alex. That said, we could have kept him, but I'd rather have Yordan Alvarez. And Luzardo is looking like a young ace too, so it's a huge risk. But if Yordan Alvarez at 22, about to turn 23 years of age, comes back and is healthy and hits the way he did in that first season, we know he's able to do it as long as his body permits him to. I think he's going to turn quickly into one of our untouchables. And I just don't have any more opportunities to acquire these untouchable guys. I regret not paying a little more or offering a little more for Jose Ramirez at the beginning of the offseason. And that has partly been what has gotten me to make all these deals to compensate, essentially. Sean Murphy, I thought was a great get. We actually traded him away eons ago. And Darno doesn't play he gets like 1 day off a week, maybe even 2 sometimes. So he's going to give us a lot of flexibility. If I want to play both catchers in 1 day, Darno might have. He had first base eligibility this year. I don't know if he'll have it next year, but I have to check that. And then Cam's first rounder, I wanted it, and Eric's second. I have a lot of picks now, so that was more important at the time. But yeah,
I love it. I think it's a great analysis there. Let's jump to Byron Buxton, Jesus Aguilar, Eric's 2021 second, Connor's 2023 second, and Ethan Hankins to Connor for Eric's 2021 first, and perennial drifter outfielder Jake Fraley. Your thoughts?
I didn't want any of those guys on my roster. Byron Buxton, Cam touched on it. He's a pain to have on your roster. I was so lucky that he went on that little home run stretch in the playoffs. Jesus Aguilar was a free agent pickup during the finals, and I was able to get a first out of it. So, yeah, I felt that was a win.
I agree. I think definitely one of your better trades here. Now, we already touched on a couple of these next few trades. So I know the Kirby Yates, Giovanni Gallegos, Trevor Rosenthal, and your 2023 second for Zach Greinke, and your 2025 third-round pick, and then also the massive 11-player deal, Joey Wendell, Sherton Apostle, Misael Urbina, 4 second-round picks, 2 in 2022, 2 in 2023 for Eddie Rosario, Junior San Quintin, Brent Rooker, and Ruth Vick and Nix. 2032 third. No, I didn't say that wrong. The pick is in 2032. Anything you wanted to add on either of those two trades between you and me?
I think you did a great job flipping Greinke for the value you got out of him. Yeah. I had no idea that value was there for Greinke and JD. So good on you to cash in and bring an outfielder like George Springer to your team. You did have to sacrifice your 2 best prospects, I thought. But I think that's a great risk. And that's what prospects are for more often than not, unless they're really looking like a sure thing in both of our trade philosophies. I know other people differ in that opinion, but that's how we've operated our teams. The first deal that you mentioned, I had forgotten that there was also the second in there, so it feels a little better even then. And I'm just really glad I was able to get those 3 relievers, because it's really hard to come by relievers in this league, actually. And you can stream them. They're the best people to stream because the results will be similar. But I do like the stability of it. So I thought it was a good way to spend Greinke, essentially. The other deal, I forgot I got Sherton Apostle and Misael Urbina in that deal. And those are 2 of my top 10 prospects. I think Urbina, I actually have maybe top 5 in our system right now. So they're definitely sticking around unless there's a compelling offer. And I don't know what I want to do with Wensleydale right now, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, I feel like 2 trades that really benefited the both of us. I think it was a win-win for both sides. Now, we're going to group these last 3 trades together, I guess. You traded Skubal and Seegers we talked about earlier for a first, a second, and 2/3. You then traded the 13th pick in Alexander Vargas for number 10. You traded Ethan Small, Jairo Solis, and Alex DeJesus to Alex and Daniel yesterday for their 2022, 2023, and 2024 third-round picks. And obviously, we just talked about this Luke Voigt trade. I feel like we hit on those a bit earlier in the podcast, which is the reason I'm kind of grouping them together here. But is there anything else you wanted to add on those trades?
Yeah, sure. And just one more thing on the trade that we were just talking about between you and I thought it was a win-win too, because I mean, you got Eddie Rosario back, and I think that's a great piece for your offense. It has kind of completed your offense again, because it was a little bit turbulent before you reacquired him. And I know you were looking for at least one more bat. And we just acquired Yastrzemski again. So I kind of had a feeling we might end up with another outfielder. I still need to get Lorenzo Cain back on the roster. So thought that was a win-win. These other 4 deals, I'm not going to touch on the Skubal deal anymore. And the package deal right after that with Yuki is in that I think it's like a 2-part trade, essentially. The deal with Daniel and Alex, if you're paying attention, I was going to drop those 3 guys probably once the draft rolled around. It was 3 free third-round picks for them to essentially have priority at my prospects. I don't think that's the worst deal ever, especially knowing that they like Small and Solis, and they're both starting pitching prospects that Fangraphs is decently high on, and both might go up in value in this next list. But I think I got 3 early third-rounders out of this, and that just kind of felt like I pulled a kind of a fast one. I don't know if I'd call it pulling a fast one, but I felt like it was a clear win.
Absolutely. Do you have any more questions, Cam?
No, I think we touched on just about everything. You've had a very busy couple of weeks, and I'm glad we were able to have you on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. And if you want to acquire a pick or two, you know where to find me.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on, Zane. And coming up, we will have Erik on to discuss the awards. He will kind of get Cam and mine's live reaction. So stick around.
We on a world tour with my man, going out to every place with the mic in their hand.
All right, we're back, and this is very exciting. We've got League Commissioner Erik McKean with us for the 3rd consecutive week, and this time he's going to help us announce the awards that you all voted on over the past week.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. We got 12 ballots submitted. One person accidentally submitted twice, and we got representatives from 11 of the 12 teams that submitted a ballot, so it's exciting.
Awesome, yeah. So you all know what the awards are, so you think we're ready to just kind of get into it?
Oh, let's do
All
it.
right, so
Cam won the coin flip, so he gets to announce the first award. Why don't you start us off, Cam?
all right, so the award for first team catcher goes to JT Real Muto of Moneyball.
No surprise there. He had a fantastic season behind the plate. If I remember correctly on Fangraphs, he was one of the 4 catchers to have enough at-bats to qualify for the batting title. So, and I think he had the highest WRC plus of all of them. I think this was an easy pick. And I'd be surprised if it wasn't unanimous.
It was not unanimous. There were 3 votes for 3 other catchers, actually. Salvador Perez, Wilson Contreras, and Austin Nola each received a vote.
Yeah, I submitted my vote for Wilson Contreras, as a matter of fact.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I was clearly wrong here about it being unanimous. Why'd you go for Contreras, Cam?
Yeah, so I'm pulling the stats up right now. 1 second. Yeah, Wilson Contreras, he had a 360 on base percentage. That's a decent amount higher than Real Muto and other catchers such as Nola. Contreras had 37 runs scored, which is higher than Real Muto. He had 10 doubles, which is more than Real Muto. And the homers were a little lower, but I believe he was close enough in all the major categories.
I'd say Salvador Perez and Austin Nola are also 2 great choices. I think Perez, I kind of disqualified a bit because he only played 37 games. That's less than 2/3 of the season, despite the fact that his numbers were great. And I think in Nola's case, just some of the counting stats weren't quite at the level of Real Muto or even Contreras. So that's kind of why I came out with Real Muto. All right. The next award is the first team first baseman. And I think to nobody's surprise, it is Yellow Champ star Freddie Freeman. Freeman had a fantastic year. And it's even, I mean, an OBP almost at 500. I know he had close to 500 OBP in September, and I believe I'm pulling up the numbers here. He finished with a 462 OBP, 341 average, a 187 WRC plus, 13 homers, 51 runs, 53 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, a higher walk rate than a strikeout rate. Overall, fantastic season. You know, he did this despite the first week of the season. He was still kind of slumping because he didn't really have a spring training, recovering from a pretty nasty bout of COVID. So good for him. I mean, I personally think he should be the MLB or the NL MVP this year. So I don't even know who else I would have considered other than maybe Jose Abreu, but I don't think his season nearly lined up with Freddie Freeman's.
Yep, Jose Abreu received 2 votes.
Wow.
Interesting. That's very surprising.
Yeah,
Abreu had more homers and a couple more RBIs, but Freeman blew him away in the other 4 categories.
he got almost a 100-point lead in OBP.
Yeah, that's significant. And, you know, I think they did an identical amount of games, identical amount of plate appearances too. So you can't even say like one of them was kind of skewed because of that. And 20 points higher into WRC plus. I get the votes for Abreu, but I respectfully disagree.
All right. And so the next award we have to announce is, as you could probably guess, the first team second baseman. And the winner of that award is, once again, not a surprising pick, DJ LeMahieu of the executive batting order, newly of the executive batting order.
Yeah, he's bounced around a couple times this offseason already, if I remember correctly. And I think, like you said, the easy pick, a 421 OBP is fantastic, 177 WRC plus, almost walked as much as he struck out. I mean, the second highest OBP of qualifying second baseman was 50 points lower. It was David Fletcher. So, yeah, I think fantastic season for LeMahieu. I think that this is a great pick. And, yeah.
Yep, there were 2 other votes. One was for Whit Merrifield, and the other was for Ozzie Albies.
Interesting. Yeah, Merrifield had the 12 steals, but the on-base percentage was 328.
Yeah, I'd say that Ozzie Albies also spent some time on the IL, and they actually demoted him towards the bottom of the lineup upon coming back. And, I mean, Whit Merrifield, not bad, but just not at LeMahieu's numbers. I'm kind of surprised here with
Albies had a 306 on-base percentage.
Yeah, just not a good year. I don't even think he was a qualified batter. I don't see him on this list or qualify for number of plate appearances. So, yeah. So the next one is the first team third baseman, and that goes to Jose Ramirez of the Indians, and now Erik's team.
Pretty easy choice for me, I would say.
Ramirez received all votes except for 1, which went to Manny Machado.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
All right, up next we have the first team shortstop. This one was definitely a trickier one for me. I was torn between a couple guys, and the winner ended up being Fernando Tatis Jr. of the executive batting order.
Yeah, I went back and forth a little bit on this one. I think this is one of the hardest ones to decide. There are a lot of great shortstop seasons this year. It looked like Tatis was going to run away with this, and then he kind of slumped in September. And I ultimately ended up still choosing him. And I think the runner-up, a very close runner-up, was Trey Turner. Tatis had more home runs, more runs, and more RBIs. The stolen base numbers were almost identical. Turner had 12, Tatis had 11. I know that Turner had an OBP that was almost 30 points higher, but I think the other counting stats kind of made up that difference for me. And again, that being said, this was such a tough decision. I think you realistically could have voted either way. And I'd also say there's some other good candidates here. Corey Seager, Tim Anderson, both had great seasons. Trevor Story had 15 stolen bases and 11 home runs. He was also fantastic. I know Dansby Swanson kind of slumped at the end, but he was looking like he could have potentially won this award earlier in the season and same with Carlos Correa. So tough decision here.
So I did end up picking Trey Turner. Those were the two guys I was torn between. And what I found my tiebreaker to be a lot of the time, because those two guys, they were split 3-3 in categories. But Turner led in both doubles and stolen bases, which I thought those were the two categories that were tight in the Roto standings for the entire year among all the teams. And I thought that a player who led in those categories over other categories could have made a larger difference to their team.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Cam. This is probably my hardest decision, and I ended up going with Tatis. Cam, you had the one Trey Turner vote, and there was also 2 votes for Corey Seager.
Corey Seager got more votes than Trey Turner. That is ridiculous.
I agree.
I agree. I mean, I think worse OBP, worse stolen base numbers by a lot, worse runs, tied in RBIs. He only had 3 more home runs. I don't get that. I get why he got a vote, but that's a poor decision in my opinion.
All right, for outfield, do you want me to do one at a time or all 5?
Let's just do all 5 because otherwise it's going to take forever. All right, so next we have the outfielders. We voted on 5 starting outfielders here for the first team, and those outfielders are Marcell Ozuna, Juan Soto, Ronald Acuna, Mookie Betts, and Mike Trout.
Right. I believe, I don't remember exactly who I picked, but I might have picked those 5 guys. Maybe I subbed Bryce Harper for Mookie Betts, but I think that's pretty much exactly who I picked, if I remember correctly.
I also had Bryce Harper on the list. I forget who I took out to put Harper in, but I had a very similar list. I mean, Soto had a dominant season. I mean, the 490 OBP. I think the most shocking number for me was he walked in over 20% of his plate appearances, but only struck out in 14.3%. That's fantastic, a 200 WRC plus. I mean, Ozuna also had a dominant season, 56 RBIs. That was the second most, only had 46, so 10 less. Trout, obviously, is just always a great pick. I mean, he had another fantastic season with a 164 WRC plus, and you're almost like looking at this thinking like, damn, like he didn't finish on top of the outfield list. Like this is kind of a disappointment, but another great season for him. I think that Ronald Acuna, again, also a great season. 406 OBP is fantastic. The 14 homers and the 8 ribbies was also good. I feel like his RBI numbers were a little lower, which is to be expected as from a leadoff hitter. But overall, a great season there. And Mookie Betts, I mean, what a debut for the Dodgers. 366 OBP, 16 homers, 10 stolen bases, 39 RBIs, 47 runs. Just a good all-around performance. Now, I have Bryce Harper in my top 5. I think it's hard to ignore the 420 OBP. And like Soto, he walked more than he struck out. And I think what also gave it for me was that he had a high stolen base number. He had 8. And did very well in the runs and RBIs category. And while he didn't lead in home runs, he still put up a very respectable 13 home runs. So I thought kind of overall that profile was particularly, valuable. And he ended up getting one of the outfield votes for me, but I think the rest of my ballot looks pretty identical to this one.
No, you pretty much said everything I was going to say. Who else? Did anyone else receive votes?
Yeah, I had Harper in place of Trout in my ballot as well, just because of the OBP and stolen base difference. Yes, a lot of people receive votes here. Bryce Harper, Dominic Smith, Mike Yastrzemski, Will Myers, Teoscar Hernandez, George Springer, Cody Bellinger, Michael Conforto, and Cole Calhoun.
Cole Calhoun, really?
That was not me.
Okay, I was gonna say, my guess would have been you. The only one that's kind of egregious to me is I know Cody Bellinger is a big name, but he just didn't have that good of a season this year. But any of the other ones stick out to you, Cam?
Besides Cole Calhoun, I don't think any of them are that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So starting pitcher now, just like outfielder, you guys were asked to vote for 5 of them, and thus we got 5 winners, and those are from Deep Sea Devers, Shane Bieber, from Danger Moose, Trevor Bauer, from Deep Sea Devers, Jacob deGrom, from Danger Moose, Yu Darvish, and from Deep Sea Devers, Dinelson Lamet. So 2 teams swept up the pitching awards. What do you think, Sahil, about that?
This is pretty close to what my ballot was. I actually put Luis Castillo instead of Dinelson Lamet, but I was debating between those 2 for the final spot. I mean, I think Bieber, deGrom, Bauer, and Darvish were the obvious ones. I think that all 4 of them had elite, fantastic seasons, and they were clearly the 4 best pitchers in baseball this year. And I think the 5th spot was kind of up for debate. I mean, I thought the numbers for Lamet and Castillo were almost identical. This is one of the tougher decisions, but I feel like you can't go wrong between Lamet or Castillo there.
Yeah, it was tough. I considered Lamet, but I disqualified him based on he only had 6 quality starts. I picked Bieber, Darvish, deGrom, and Bauer, just like I'm sure most people did. But my 5th pick may be a tiny bit surprising. I chose Lance Lynn. He had 10 quality starts this year. Only Bieber and Darvish had as many. He was near the top of the leaderboard in strikeouts, and the ERA wasn't the best, but his WHIP was right around 1. And I thought, especially with those 10 quality starts, I could convince myself that he was my number 5.
He's also a very good pick for that spot.
Yeah, I ended up going with Lamet for my last one. He actually had more innings pitched than deGrom, so I don't think that was a factor. And I ended up going with him because he had an insane 2.09 ERA and a .86 WHIP, in addition to the almost 100 strikeouts. A couple other guys that received votes were Garrett Cole, Lucas Giolito, Kenta Maeda, Lance Lynn, Luis Castillo, and Dylan Bundy.
Yeah, it seems like a solid list to me. Next up, we got the relievers. We're going to start with the closers here. The 2 first-team all-star closers were Liam Hendricks of Danger Moose and Brad Hand, who ended the season with the executive batting order. I wasn't particularly surprised with these results. These were the 2 closers I voted for. They finished 1-2 in the majors in saves. Hand had a 2.05 ERA, 1.37 FIP. It's just fantastic. He didn't give up a homer all season. Liam Hendricks, even better ERA and FIP, 1.78, 1.14. I thought that these were the consensus top 2 picks.
Yeah, I voted for those 2 as well. And some of the others that got votes were Alex Colomé, Josh Hader, and Brandon Kinsler.
Interesting. Yeah, Colomé was really the only other person that I even looked at, but the strikeouts were just not where I wanted them to be. And yeah, let's move on to our 2 first team setup men. And these 2 guys, they're the 2 guys I voted for as well. That's Jake Diekman and Devin Williams. Diekman being on my team and Williams being on Eric's.
Yeah, I both had fantastic seasons, both great free agent pickups for both of you. So I commend you for that. And I mean, I thought those are the 2 front runners. I can't really think of anyone else that I seriously considered.
Yeah, I gave Tyler Duffy a look. He had the 12 holds and a solid ERA and WHIP. And I think it's exciting for me. I had the best closer and the best setup man, both on my team and both on the Oakland A's. So that's a little fun on my end.
Yeah, I voted for those 2 as well. I gave some consideration to James Karinchak, but his ERA was a little too high. But anyway, the others to receive votes were Tyler Duffy, Drew Pomeranz, Sergio Romo, and Shane Green.
All right, next we move into some of the team and trade specific categories. The first one is most improved team, and this one's actually a tie. between Danger Moose, Cam's team, and Deep Sea Devers, Ruthvik and Nick. I voted for Deep Sea Devers. I mean, if you look at some of the players that they have acquired since the beginning of the offseason last year, I mean, they got Jacob deGrom. That was a huge get. I mean, getting one of the top pitchers in baseball, and, you know, the ability for them to kind of give up on Strasburg at the right time was particularly clutch for them. Getting Salvador Perez is a very underrated get. He obviously got some votes for the catcher award. Acquiring Ronald Acuna was obviously the big one. He got Dinelson Lamet. I know he gave up Mookie Betts and Max Fried to get that deal done, but that worked out very well for him, I thought. Getting Jose Abreu at the beginning of the season was huge. He was a huge part of the team, and he also got Dylan Carlson, which is a very nice prospect, either for that long-term outfield or to keep. He got Matt Foster for basically nothing during the season. That was another fantastic move. And getting Didi Gregorius and Zach Gallen at the trade deadline really kind of solidified a couple holes that he had, kind of rounding out the rotation and at shortstop. So I thought he was the kind of the clear winner there. Other guys I considered were Clayton and Jake.
So thank you to everyone who voted for me. It's a very big honor to be the most improved team. I did not vote for either of these teams, actually. I voted for Yuki because I picked his team to finish 10th in the preseason and he ended up finishing 5th. So congratulations to Yuki. The reason I didn't pick my team in particular is I don't think my team is that much improved from last year. I think we really easily could have been the 4th best team last year. We just got a little unlucky and decided to completely punt the season because, frankly, we'd rather have Adley than maybe finishing 6th last year, and I'm still happy with that decision. So I wouldn't say my team was super improved. Maybe less unlucky and more focused would be what I would say. But yeah, thank you again. It's a big honor.
Yeah, I originally had my vote for UCAM, but then I changed it to Ruthvik, basically because of the talent difference that he got, rather than like going from second to playoff team, but just the difference being trying. Yeah, other teams that received votes were Yuki, Alex and Zach, and Sahil.
Interesting. I mean, I guess improving from losing in the finals to winning in the finals is quite the improvement. I will say I did make a lot of trades. You know, I could see why someone would vote for me, but I definitely don't think I was the most improved. I think there are definitely other way more deserving teams.
Okay, so the next award is a fun one. We're moving into the trade-centric awards. This one is the most surprising offseason trade. And this one, everyone can pretty much say where they were when this trade happened. It's the trade where EBO traded away Ohtani to Erik. Certainly fits the bill, and it's the one that immediately came to mind when I saw the question.
Yeah, I love Sahil's reaction after that too.
that one just kind of broke my mind. Like I just remember on draft day just how how Ohtani centric things were. The classic quote, like, if I hear Ohtani one more time in the next 24 hours, I'm going to explode. And it's like the hitter or the pitcher, hence the name of our podcast. And I just never thought EBO was going to trade him, and then they did. So I thought that this was kind of my clear front runner. I'd say EBO's made some other trades that I've really looked at and been like, what the fuck? Like, I can't believe that this just happened. But nothing quite beats my reaction to the Ohtani trade. That genuinely blew my mind.
Yeah, the only other trade I even thought about for this was where Gleyber Torres was traded for about 15,000 pieces.
I remember just kind of feeling very content with my roster. It was in May. You and I had kind of done that Gleyber deal in kind of like January, February range, and I thought that my roster was set. Erik just came to me with this big offer, and finally I was just like, this is too good to refuse, and I thought I could trade those picks and prospects and players he gave me into something better, and I thought I did. So yeah, I think that definitely came out of left field. I'm not usually the one who's trading an established major leaguer for parts. But I think that was a part of the surprise. But I still very much like that deal. So
Yeah, the other trades that got votes were the Acuna Betts trade and the Wander Franco trade that involved Eloy going to counter.
Yeah, definitely both very surprising, but nothing in my mind beats the EBO trading away their baby.
yeah, I will say we trade so many big stars in this league where I'm almost not surprised when like Wander Franco's traded, because he's been traded like 3 or 4 times now. Like Acuna has been traded multiple times. Same with Betts. So, it's just nothing surprises me anymore. All right, the most surprising in-season trade comes from the executive batting order and Acuna Matata without Acuna. EBO traded Paul Goldschmidt, Andrew Benintendi, Spencer Howard, Andre Jimenez, and Tiger All-Star Nico Goodrum to Alex for Mookie Betts and Mike Yastrzemski. I know that several teams had been in discussions with Alex for Mookie Betts, myself included, and it was particularly surprising to me to see him being dealt for that package. I know Goldschmidt had a fantastic year. Benintendi went on the IL, I think maybe even the day after that trade. I know they like Spencer Howard. I think Jimenez has already been traded. Goodrum's kind of irrelevant. And as we've seen today, Yastrzemski's bounced around multiple times. So it's very shocking at the time. I didn't think that was a trade that was going to clinch it. But maybe not surprised that Mookie got dealt in the first place.
Yeah, I voted for the Wander trade as like you did, Sahil. But I think the Betts trade is definitely deserving of this award. I think that was probably the most pissed I was after a trade was completed, because I thought my offer for Betts was like way better than what Zane and Max gave up. But anyway, like you said, Wander, Glaber trade got a vote in the Albies trade, and the other one that got a vote was Cam trading away Eugenio Suarez.
Ooh. Yeah, that was surprising. I was surprised I was doing it at the time too, if I'm being honest. I think it was at the time it felt a little reactionary, but the more I think about it, the better I feel about it, just because I don't think Suarez is ever going to hit 49 home runs again. And it could look really ugly for EBO in a couple of years if Gorman and Rodriguez exceed my expectations. Okay, up next is the most lopsided offseason trade, and this was one that I struggled a lot with finding a winner. There were maybe 4 or 5 trades which I thought could have been the winner, but the one that won was February 4th when Big League Gala Champs traded Madison Bumgarner, Gene Segura, Michael Chavis, Abraham Toro, Jarren Duran, and Joey Cantillo to Acuna Matata, still with Acuna at the time, who sent Sahil back, Aaron Nola, Miguel Vargas, and William Contreras, the most lopsided trade of the offseason.
Yeah, so this was one of my personal favorite trades of the offseason. I also had a hard time deciding this kind of category. I think there are a lot of great contenders. The one thing that kind of did it for me was this was one of the trades I looked at where I was just like, there is absolutely like no prospect or nothing in the future that I really look at and I'm like, yes, like there's a solid chance this player is going to become a star and make up for this trade. I mean, Bumgarner I thought was already a bit on the decline, which is why I was glad to trade him. And he kind of proved my concerns correct. Chavis is now sitting in free agency. Toro's sitting in free agency. Duran was a throw-in in the free Sixto deal that just occurred a couple of weeks ago. And Joey Cantillo is just kind of another guy to me. I think the only guy that's really still contributing to Alex's roster is Gene Segura. And Gene Segura had like a 107 WRC plus. He had like an average season. He added second and third base eligibility this year, which I guess was nice. But like, you could have gotten a guy like that a lot cheaper. Aaron Nola obviously was a huge get. I mean, he was someone I considered voting for as one of the top 5 starting pitchers. And William Contreras was someone I turned around and traded to Yuki right before the trade deadline to help me get Trevor Rosenthal, who ended up being a pretty significant part of my championship winning team. And then I ended up flipping him to get Greinke back about a week ago. So I just overall thought that, I mean, this trade is looking like Gene Segura for Aaron Nola, and, you know, kind of what William Contreras helped do for my team. And I think there's a clear winner there. I think the Aaron Nola side might just win. So
yeah, the one I voted for, I wanted to pick maybe a slightly less complicated trade, just because who knows how that one's going to play out in a few years, even though that does look really bad for the team acquiring Bumgarner. But I chose one that kind of didn't really cross my radar at the time, but looking back, it's just really egregious. Erik acquired Marcell Ozuna and a first-round draft pick, which is going to be 3rd overall, and he gave up Jorge Soler. So he got which is just ridiculous. Ozuna was one of the top 5 outfielders in the league this year, maybe even second best in fantasy. And he gets Austin Martin or Max Meyer, one of those guys, for a guy who was downright terrible this year. So I'm just blown away that happened.
Yeah, I was considering that one, but in Soler's defense, he was kind of hurt at the end of the year. He put up decent numbers. And also, I think Goldschmidt had a bit of a bounce back year. So, I mean, it's not terrible in the Goldschmidt department, but I also voted for the Aaron Nola trade because, boy, Matt Bumgarner was just terrible this year. And I don't know if it's going to get any better.
yeah, I mean, I'd agree with Eric. I think there's a chance that Soler can bounce back. I can't necessarily say the same thing for Madison Bumgarner. I'm very pessimistic on his chances, but I do agree. I mean, Ozuna and the 3rd pick for Soler, it's pretty damn lopsided. Yeah.
So this category received a ton of different votes. It was those two that you guys are talking about. Also, the Glaber for a shit ton from me received a vote. The Royce Lewis to Ruthvik trade got a vote. The Max Fried to Ruthvik trade got a vote. The Urshela for a 3rd-round pick got a vote, as well as Trevor Story for Carrasco and Baez. The Charlie Blackmon Riley Green trade, and the Miguel Sano Eduardo Escobar trade.
Wow. Does not seem like there's really a consensus here. I thought that was one of the hardest categories to vote for because we had like 50-ish, 60-ish trades this past offseason. So, and I feel like a lot of people had kind of different interpretations of how to vote for this category. The Torres deal is one that's really interesting to me, and I still kind of like go back and forth here. I mean, obviously, I think this year that trade definitely panned out more for me. And even though I traded away all those assets, I feel like I traded them away for a better return. Gleiber didn't have a great year, but you did trade him for Wander. So I think that was the one thing that kind of held me back from voting for that deal, because if Wander just becomes an absolute stud, I think that deal is worth it for you no matter what, because you've gotten, you know, someone who could be a top 3 to 5 fantasy player, like a Juan Soto, like a Tatis is right now. So I think it's a little too early to quite judge that deal, even though I think the deal in a vacuum probably isn't really looking good for you right now, and probably just without kind of looking at what happened afterwards is probably an L for you, in my opinion.
Yeah, to be fair, though, it is 2020, and Torres is kind of bouncing back towards the end of the year, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, definitely. So the next category is the most lopsided in-season trade, and it is the Paul Goldschmidt for Mookie Betts deal that we discussed earlier. I don't have too much more to add on that, but you know, I think Betts is a top 5 to 10 dynasty asset for at least the next 5 years. And Yaz had a great season. Not that Goldschmidt didn't have a good season, but I agree. I think there's a clear winner there. And I don't think there's another trade where I really looked at it and thought like, damn, this was like really lopsided.
I picked the one in which Erik traded 2 current major league superstars for Wander Franco. I just thought that's wildly out of line with how how teams in the league have valued prospects, and I just thought it was crazy, even if it does work out for him at the end.
Well, superstar is kind of a stretch, but yeah, I get what you're saying. And Clevenger might have that injury-prone tag. But anyway, this was very close. The winner received 5 votes, and the Wander deal received 4 votes. And other trades receiving a vote was Cam trading away Ian Happ and Pablo Lopez, Sahil trading away Urquidy and Rowan Wick for a third, or Urquidy for a third and Rowan Wick, I mean. And the last one was the second Suarez trade, where Yuki traded away like Ryan Hayes and someone else, Whit Merrifield, I think, for Suarez.
So one trade I'm surprised it didn't get any votes was the Erik trading Dylan Carlson, Jose Abreu, and Joan Duran to Ruthvik and Nick for Joe Musgrove, Justice Sheffield, Eric Hosmer, and 2 second-round picks. Just with Abreu having an MVP caliber season, and I think, with Dylan Carlson looking like the best prospect in that deal, I'm a bit more surprised that trade didn't get any votes.
Yeah, I was a little surprised too.
I think I'll win that one in the long term, but we'll see.
Okay, so the next one we have is the best offseason hitter pickup. And this is just a player who was left on waivers that a team added. And the winner, I guess it's me. It's Ian Happ. I picked him up right at the start of the season. Ended up flipping him, thinking that he was going to regress, and he did not. So Ian Happ, the best in-season, or the best off-season hitter pickup, I should say.
In your defense, over his last 70-ish at bats, he had a 130 average. So maybe you could have sold him a little higher at his peak. But I think that you jumped ship before his value kind of cratered at the end of the season. But definitely a great pickup on your end. So I didn't think this was a particularly deep category to vote for, but I thought that Ian Happ was a very worthy pick, and he had a great season and a good low-cost acquisition for Cam.
The one reason I hesitated to vote for him was because I traded him away pretty early in the season, and I didn't really get to inherit all of the value that he provided.
Yeah, this is kind of a bummer for me too, because I had Hap for a couple week-long stretch in the off season, but I dropped him for some reason. But anyway, yeah, this is a tough category. I voted for Hap, but others receiving votes were Travis d'Arnaud, Dio Urshela, and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa.
Kiner-Falefa, that's surprising.
He did not have a good year. I think he's a little bigger name just because he can catch and play shortstop more than anything. I thought Urshela was a good pickup. I wish I hadn't immediately traded him away days after picking him up for a 3rd-round pick, although it's interesting to see how much he's been kind of traded since then. And I think Travis d'Arnaud was also a good pick. I mean, he was a starting catcher for a team that made the finals and had a fantastic year, and even batted cleanup a bit for the Braves. So he's a great pick. I mean, arguably maybe should have been the pick in my opinion.
Yeah, you could probably guess who voted for Kiner-Falefa, but he was catcher eligible and he stole a lot of bases, but he will not be catcher eligible next year.
All right, the best off-season pitcher acquisition now was Kenta Maeda for the executive batting order. I was a little annoyed because I had really considered picking him up, but I was like, no, I got 10 starting pitchers, including John Gray. There's no way I'd need Kenta Maeda, and sure enough, Kenta Maeda would have been nice. Obviously, I mean, we talked a bit earlier about just how great of a season Kenta Maeda had, so I'm not going to go into it more. And I think one of the tiebreakers for me, because there were, I think, more great offseason pitcher pickups, i.e. Pablo Lopez and Zach Plesac, who were also 2 guys I had that I decided to cut because I just don't know how to make proper ad drops. The tiebreaker for me was that Maeda was the one start that EBO had during the finals. So he was a major contributor to a finals team and almost led them to a victory. So, and was probably their most reliable starting pitcher throughout the year. So I thought that he was kind of an easy vote for me.
Yeah, I agree. I had maybe considered voting for Corbin Burns, but Maeda was the really obvious choice in my opinion. Who else received votes, Eric?
Yeah, I almost added my in the offseason too, so I'm kind of salty about that. But the other three that received votes, this is a really strong category, actually, much stronger than the hitter pickup in the offseason. The other three that received votes are all currently stranglers. Zach Plesac, Pablo Lopez, and Corbin Burns.
Damn. Well, that bodes well for your team next year, and their quest to return to the playoffs.
Yeah, well done. Even though Pablo Lopez was one of my pickups, would have been fun to win both. But yeah, definitely good guys for you to have. And now we transition into in-season pickups. This is the best in-season hitter pickup, and that would be this is the person I voted for, and I'm sure it was a lot of people's pick, Teoscar Hernandez.
Yeah, I didn't vote for Teoscar Hernandez, but I see why people voted for him. Fantastic kind of a breakout season there for the Blue Jays. I know that they had some question marks going into their outfield before the season, and Hernandez was one of the guys who really filled in. The 340 OBP was great, 16 homers was great, 6 stolen bases. So he kind of contributed in a lot of different categories. I just feel like the 30% strikeout rate is always just going to be a sticking point for me with him. I feel like his upside is a bit limited kind of long term. And he had kind of a high BABIP this year, which maybe explains a bit of the spike in batting average. Because, I mean, over the past 2 years, he had a 239 and a 230 average, and this year is a 289. But definitely a great pickup for this year. My vote went in a bit of a different direction, and I voted for a tie of Joey Wendell and Chris Taylor. And I picked them because they were very strong contributors for a championship team. They plugged in effectively a hole for me when I lost Jose Altuve, Ketel Marte, and Matt Chapman. So I was basically starting over at second and third base. And Chris Taylor really filled in at second base when both Altuve and Marte were hurt. And then by the time both of them had kind of come back for the finals, Taylor was someone that I kind of plugged in into some different holes when like Correa needed a day off, or when I thought he had a better matchup than one of my outfielders, or when Nelson Cruz was hurt for a bit in the final. So I think that he was really just kind of a clutch performer. And Matt Chapman, you know, when he got hurt, he was the only third baseman I had on my roster. So I cycled through Rio Ruiz, and he didn't quite work out. And then I picked up Wendell, and he just really solidified that spot. And it was nice to kind of set my lineup each day and know that, you know, Wendell was a guy that I could trust to, you know, not really hurt me and put up some decent numbers, including a little bit of speed, which was something that maybe my roster didn't have as much of this year outside of Trevor Story. So I thought that while maybe they weren't the best batters, I thought that their contributions to a championship winning team maybe outweighed the fact that some of the other hitters had ever so slightly better.
Yeah, I went in a bit of a different direction too. I went with Dom Smith, basically because like he's never received consistent playing time, and this year he did, and he kind of broke out, and I trust him to keep this up. But I think, yeah, Teoscar Hernandez was very deserving as well. So anyway, some of the other votes were obviously Wendell and Chris Taylor, but this is also a pretty funky category. Others receiving votes were Austin Nola, Randall Grichuk, Jackie Bradley Jr. for some reason, and Donovan Solano.
Interesting. Donovan Solano was on waivers for most of the season, if I recall correctly.
Well, he had a hot start to the season. He's batting like 400 or something. So I guess kind of based off of that, I think Austin Nola is also a good vote.
Jackie Bradley Jr. is currently on waivers.
All right, so the next category is the best in-season pitcher pickup, and that award goes to Jake Diekman of Danger News.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll give another victory speech if you want me to. I'm glad that my little push to get people to vote for him worked. Diekman got 13 holds out of my 19 holds, which single-handedly put me in the playoffs. I was just kind of looking very early in the season for a guy to get me holds. I think this was before I traded for Trevor May, but I was just thinking Jake Diekman's going to be setting up Liam Hendricks, who I already have, and they're going to win a lot of games, and they've got a phenomenal bullpen there. Maybe he could work out, and he very, very much did.
Yeah, Diekman was also my pick. Another person I gave consideration to was Devin Williams of the Brewers and Eric's team. I think the tiebreaker for me was that Diekman was a big contributor to a playoff team, and Eric did not make the playoffs. So that's why I voted for Diekman.
Yeah, I voted for Diekman as well, and he only received 3 votes, so it looks like it was just us 3. All right, some of these other votes are going to blow your mind. We had votes for Framber Valdez, Devin Williams, Jeremy Jeffress, Brandon Kinsler, Brad Keller, Adam Wainwright, David Peterson, and Dakota Hudson.
Oh, God. Who voted for Adam Wainwright?
That was Alex.
I'm
Dakota Hudson, my God.
I kind of get some of these. Like Jeremy Jeffress, like really came on as a closer for the Cubs, and I know EBO had that big bullpen centric strategy, so I see why they voted, or I see why he got a vote. I don't get the Wainwright actually had a nice season to his credit, but like he just kind of sat on Connor's team. The only other guy I think who maybe I think you could argue over Diekman or Williams is Framber Valdez. I mean, very nice season, and I think that he could be a solid starter for the Astros for years to come. But I don't think he had the impact that Diekman or Williams had this year.
And yeah, we've got our final 3 awards left. The first one is Rookie of the Year. And I was torn between 2 players, and it looks like the winner was neither of them. It was Kyle Lewis.
I almost kind of forgot about him. I mean, I guess he's sit up there in the Pacific Northwest, not much of a surprise. But yeah, Kyle Lewis had a great season. Cam, you traded Kyle Lewis. Was it to Eric for a 2nd and 3rd round pick?
Yeah, I did. I was just kind of trying to clear up roster space, figuring I didn't need him. Little did I know I needed him.
Yeah, I mean, 364 OBP, 11 homers, 5 stolen bases, 126 WRC plus, and played in 58 of the games. Those are very solid numbers. But Lewis did not get my vote. My vote went to Alec Baum. I think Baum just had a fantastic debut in the majors. He had a 400 OBP, a 138 WRC plus. I know that it was kind of buoyed a bit by a 410 BABIP, and maybe the counting stats weren't as high, only 4 homers and 1 stolen base. But I think for me, it was one of those things where like every time I was playing Cam into semis and just looked over, Alec Baum was just killing it. And I think that just kind of in my mind just made it seem like Alec Baum just had to be the pick. I think he had the biggest impact of any rookie in the league in terms of the effect on our fantasy season. And I mean, he just had a very, very solid year overall. So he was my pick.
Yeah, I agree. He got my vote as well, maybe a little bit of a homer vote. And Devin Williams was the other guy I thought about voting for, just because he did get my vote as one of the setup men of the year, and he just had a terrific season that I thought maybe could have been awarded twice.
I also considered him. He was my runner-up.
Yeah, you can probably guess who I voted for. But anyway, others to receive votes were Alec Baum, Jake Cronenworth, and Luis Robert.
All right, the next pick is the Cy Young Award winner, and I don't think that this is going to be a surprise for anyone. It's Shane Bieber of the Indians and Ruth Vick's team. I mean, I don't know what more to say about Bieber than we didn't say when we did the first team starting pitcher. I mean, I think he was clearly the best pitcher in baseball this year. The strikeout numbers were insane. I know there was like records that he broke for the number of strikeouts that he had in that period. A 1.63 ERA. Like, I don't remember the last time a starting pitcher finished with a sub-2 ERA on the season. I know it was, only in 12 starts instead of a full season, but nonetheless impressive. And a 207 FIP, which, if I remember correctly, also led all starting pitchers. I mean,
yeah, I have no complaints. I think Shane Bieber was the clear best pitcher in the league, both in real life and in fantasy. And I'm curious to see if this one was unanimous or if someone slid a vote to Bauer or maybe to Grom.
It was unanimous.
Good. He deserves it.
Yeah, congrats to Ruthvik. And the final award we have is the league MVP. This is the big one. And the winner of the league MVP is, drumroll please. Great drumroll, guys. Congratulations, Sahil. It's Freddie Freeman.
Let's go. Well deserved. I mean, Freddie Freeman had a amazing season. I mean, I know we talked about this earlier. I'm not going to say everything again, but like he had the 187 WRC plus, was fantastic. 462 OBP, 13 homers, 53 RBIs, 51 runs. I mean, just dominated this season. Marcelo Ozuna also had a great season, but I think, again, he comes up just short to Freddie Freeman in enough of these categories. I mean, DJ LeMahieu, Jose Abreu are also guys I feel like could have been considered.
Yeah, I agree. I think Freeman's a deserving MVP. And all we have left is to vote for the utility spots and the middle corner infield spots. Is that correct, Erik?
Yep. And Freeman received 9 votes. Tatis received 2 votes, and Shane Bieber received 1 vote.
I'll say a quick word about Tatis. I think he could have had a very real argument to have won the MVP had the season ended like 2 weeks earlier, but that end of the season slump he had, I think, kind of took him out of it. So great season. I think he'll be in like the top 5 of the MVP voting in real life, but I just think that Freddie Freeman just had the better overall season than Tatis.
Yep, and like you're saying, Cam, we will vote on middle infield and corner infield after the podcast is released. We'll just do it in the channel probably, and then after those are determined, we'll vote for utility.
All right, that sounds terrific. I'm looking forward to that. Congratulations to all our winners. And yeah, do you have anything else you want to say, Erik, before we wrap this up?
Nope, just thanks for having me.
All right, thanks for coming on for the 3rd episode in a row. And we'll talk to you again soon, probably.
All right, thanks.
Like Fred, you ain't never lied. Fuck the rap shit, my gangster been solidified. Still do my business on the side. Bitch, if you police then pay me, no, never mind. I was thugging, black and red laces.